Woohoo, we're live. This is Math 40, Elementary Algebra. This is section 4.2, surprise page 3. And Matt Damon talked me into doing one more problem because this is really a bear of a problem. Where's my bear? Okay, there's the bear. There's Matt Damon. Okay, so this is another problem where we've got two equations, but this top equation is all lousy with fractions, and the bottom equation is just a mess. It has not pulled itself together. So what we're going to have to do in this case is we won't just have to solve it. We actually have to make each of the equations very beautiful first, or at least more beautiful than they already are. So what I'd like you to do is imagine like an 80s rom-com montage where each of the equations is like working out and learning to put on makeup, something really, really, really questionable like that. So imagine your favorite montage music so that we're going to make these equations look beautiful. And then, the captain of the football team will want to date them. So first equation first, I will number them so we don't lose track of which is which. The first equation is really, it's not terrible. But it's not easy to approach because of all the fractions. So what I'm going to propose is that you're going to clear fractions. In order to do this, you need to come up with the least common denominator. And the least common denominator for us, I think the one that makes the most sense, because I've got a denominator of 4, of 2, and of 4, I'm going to go ahead and choose 4. Now, if you chose 32, that will also work. You can multiply all of them together, but you don't need it. You only need a big enough number that will cancel each of these separately. So what I'm going to do with my least common denominator is I'm going to go ahead and multiply each of my terms on both sides of the equation times 4. And I'm going to write 4 as 4 over 1 because it's going to be easier to cancel. Okay, there we go. So right off the bat, this one cancels and we've got y equals. And then here, this guy is not going to cancel completely. This is a 2, so that cancels, but it cancels with the 4 and leaves a 2. So I've got 2 times the opposite of x. And then here, the 4s cancel completely like that. And I'm left with minus 3. So I think I get y equals negative 2x minus 3. That's the first one. Okay, back up to the top. I'm going to use this paper in a slightly different way. I'm going to use the space over to the right. Separate this out. Number 2 is possibly easier to approach because it doesn't have those fractions in it, but it just has, it's kind of a gobbledygook of stuff on both sides. So here I'm going to recommend that since you're going to use the systems of equations, and in this case, this is going to be using substitution. I'm going to recommend that what you do is move everything over onto the left side. So let's get everybody over onto the left side except for the constant. I'm going to leave the constant over here, but this y and this minus x, or the opposite of x, need to come over here. Okay, so I'm going to subtract y from both sides. And I get 2x minus 2y equals negative 1 minus x. Now I'm going to add x. Now, if you prefer, you can do the x and the y in one step. You don't have to wait to do it for 2 steps. Over here, this of course cancels. Over on the left, I get 3x minus 2y equals a negative 1. So if you look at what we've done, all that we've done is we've taken our system, but we've written each of the equations in a way that's going to make them a lot easier to work with, much more simple to work with. So now I'm going to write my 2 equations. First one is y equals the opposite of 2x, or negative 2x minus 3. And the second one is 3x minus 2y equals negative 1. And we're going to work with these together. So I can put the brace in. Oops, sorry. There you go. Woohoo. So those are our 2 new equations. And let's go ahead and work with them. Now, this happens to happen. This happens to come up in 4.2. So we're going to use substitution. But in the next section, you're going to learn elimination. And you are welcome if you move this 2x over onto the left, so it becomes y plus 2x. So you add 2x to both sides. You could also use elimination on this. It doesn't have to be substitution. But step one, solve for one variable. Okay, so that's already done. Bam. Equation 1 looks good. Woohoo. A little tipsy, but good. And then step 2, substitute. So we're going to take equation number 2, 3x minus 2y equals -1. Here I'm going to start coloring. Here's my first equation. There's my first equation. And here is my second equation. I don't know if you can hear, but the crows are very excited. The crows, it's well-known fact, crows love systems of equations. This is a thing. It's science, actually. So I'm going to take my 3x minus 2, and in place of the y, I'm going to put what y equals in the other equation, in the yellow equation, equation number 1, negative 2x minus 3. So that is, here's my yellow part of the equation. This goes inside the blue equation. So we're smashing the two equations together to create a new, better equation that only has x's in it. So let's see, I've got 3x minus 2 times a negative 2x. So we're going to have to be very careful here because we're going to be changing signs. So this says minus 2x minus 3 inside. And so I'm going to multiply by -2. So I'm going to get positive 4x, positive 6 equals -1. Or it looks like 7x plus 6 equals -1. 7x equals -7. Now you're going to have to hold that thought because I've run out of paper, but I'm pretty sure y'all know what this means. If I have 7x equal to -7, then the next step, of course, is just to divide by 7. And I get x equals -1. So that's x. We still need to find y. And I will copy from the previous page. We know that y equals -2x minus 3. That is the yellow equation. Sorry, the whole thing is the yellow equation. So let's see, I get y equals -2 times x, which is -1, minus 3. So y equals, it looks like 2 minus 3 also equals -1. So our final answer is going to be x equals -1, y equals -1, or -1, -1. Woohoo! And we get a single answer, which means happy Matt Damon. Yay! You got a single answer. Woohoo! Congratulations. Woohoo! He's very excited. Woohoo! Okay. Now, that was the good news. The good news is we saved Matt Damon. And, you know, it is actually shocking when you think about it, how many times I have saved Matt Damon in my career, and he never calls, he never writes, not even a single word of thanks. But, you know, okay, he's a busy actor, I'm sure. But, you know, that suggests that mathematicians aren't also busy. Okay. I'm stalling. You're right. You can tell when I'm stalling. You can hear it. Give myself some space. Now, here's the bad news. The bad news is whenever you check, you have to check the original equations. Always check the original. Always check the original equation. So in our case, we have to check these. Okay. So shall we check the first one? The first one, and let me copy this down. Y over 4 equals the opposite of x over 2 minus 3 over 4. Pardon me. Okay, shall we do it? Y is -1. That's not a question, it's a statement. Y is -1 and x is -1. So I get -1/4. Is that equal to the opposite of -1 over 2 minus 3/4? So this is 1/2 minus 3/4. So this is 2/4 minus 3/4 is equal to -1 over 4. Now here's the thing. It's just between me and you, okay? Let's not tell anyone we're having this conversation, but let's be honest. If you're taking a test, and if I say you need to solve, and I don't say you have to check, if I don't mention checking, you're not required to. And honestly, if you're really bad at fractions, it could be that on a test you skip the checking if you're not required to. When I grade, I always give partial credit. So here is how to kind of game the way that I give you points, because it's fair, because many people already know how to game the system. And that is that it's possible that if I say you have to check, you start the check and then you just leave it at started. I will give you part of the points, and then you lose a point or two for not finishing it. But it could be that if fractions really are giving you a hard time and you're taking a test, maybe you don't go through all of this. Maybe you say, you know what, I'm just going to be okay with losing those points. Let me do something else. When you've finished all the rest of the test, you can come back and try this. So sometimes checking is more trouble than it's worth. And especially in the beginning, be really gentle with yourselves, because it is really easy to make a mistake. And in our case, did it work? Yay, it did. So it checked in the first equation. But there are a lot of times when it won't check. So just be very gentle, have lots of patience, give yourself lots of extra time, go outside, remind yourself that the world does not revolve around math. It really doesn't. It really doesn't. Okay, let's check the second one. The second one is not quite so terrible. It's not great, but it's this long equation. So let me write that down for us. 2x minus y equals -1 plus y minus x. And my two values are -1 and -1. So 2 times -1 minus -1 equals -1 plus -1 minus -1. Oh my gosh, I'm so tired of saying 1. Okay, so let's check to see if this checks out. Over on the left, I get -2 plus 1. You've got two minuses. The two minuses, they go together to make, oh, that's a multiplication. This is way harder than they made it seem in video production class, which I never took. Okay, -2 plus 1 is -1. Over here, I've got -1 minus 1 plus 1, which equals -1. Look, -1 equals -1. Woohoo! Now, is this confusing? Yes. If you were doing this on a test, would you necessarily get it right? Not necessarily. So what I would say is do your best on a test and understand that when you're under pressure, stuff like this can go sideways. So do your best and, just think about timing and pacing. And if a problem that's worth 1 or 2 points is giving you a really hard time, maybe you just move on. You do something else. Okay, here's Matt Damon saying, woohoo, we saved him yet again. And I will see you in the next video. Woohoo.